So, still looking back at the films of Zack. Yeah. So now we're getting into the films that, and really there's only two. Because the third one, no one, well, some people. Aquaman got to see it. But of course, this being what became the DCEU, and it all began with Man of Steel, which was the second attempt by Warner's to reboot the Superman film franchise. Christopher Reeve, of course, cast a long shadow over it, and they even tried with Superman Returns to just continue that storyline with the sequel to the second movie with Brandon Routh as Superman. It had a lot of problems, most notably just the whole plot and storyline. It's too bad. I thought Brandon Routh did an okay job, and it's fortunate that he was sort of robbed of it. And it almost seems that Henry Cavill's about to suffer the same fate. But nevertheless, and actually I think he tried out for this movie and lost out to Brandon Routh. And then apparently I did test for the J.J. Abrams one, the Flyby, which thank God that never saw the light of day. But then again, maybe it will. But anyway, so he finally gets a shot at being Superman thanks to Zack Snyder. And here we go. After the Dark Knight trilogy, or as it was coming to an end, Warner's approached Christopher Nolan about what could he do for a Superman film series. And so he agreed to produce it, and he hires Zack Snyder to handle the directorial chore of filming this movie. And in a lot of ways, leading up to it, before they even settled on the title of Man of Steel, a lot of people were just referring to it as Superman Begins. And, of course, you can't really do a Dark Knight style story on Superman so much, but you can have it grounded in reality in the world that he lives in. And that's pretty much the premise here. Also that he's a freshman superhero. And it's important to understand why things happen the way they do in this film, because there's a lot of massive destruction that goes on in it. And that was one of the big complaints, that this Superman was no good. He didn't move the battle to a safer place to have it, and all this sort of thing. Of course, if you remember, in Superman 2, the same thing sort of happened. Now, they didn't have the effects then to do the massive destruction, but the battle between Superman and the Kryptonians takes a while in the middle of Metropolis, and there's a bit of destruction there before he finally figures it out and leads them to the Fortress of Solitude. Here, of course, the destruction is far more massive, and the bulk of it happens long before Superman arrives to fight Zod. I mean, really, the threat of the Kryptonians is over by the time he and Zod duke it out towards the end. And this all plays into that. This is the first time he's done this. He's putting on the suit, for the first time in this story, and he arrives in it and had to turn himself in to the military to be handed over to Zod. So, some of the biggest complaints here are, for the most part, not fair, I don't think, and are not taking into account just what the story is. Probably the look of it, the saturation was probably a bit much. It kind of fits. I mean, it certainly fits a Batman movie, but not so much a Superman. You could have made it a little bit brighter, not so much like they did for the promos for Justice League, but still, the darkness, that was a bit much. But that tone and elements, it reminds me of the tone of the Nolan Dark Knight. And Superman, or Clark at this point, is sort of lost, and he's finding himself and not quite sure knowing what to do. And we get, rather than telling in a linear story from beginning to end, we get flashbacks of his childhood here and there, and explaining why he's feeling like an outsider. And that really goes all the way back to Action 1, where Jonathan Kent, or John Kent as he was then, explained to him that he needed to hide the powers, because if he didn't, people would be afraid of him, and that was a fear that they had. And so this makes him a bit of an oddball. And he has to, because he has to restrain the powers at the same time that he's learning them. You know, the powers scare him and all this stuff. And that's all good. Yeah, that all fits into the personality and whatnot. And of course, the biblical metaphors here that he's, you know, he's Christ, and especially what happens to him in Batman versus Superman. Well, and all that. So here he is. He's in a world that, for the most part, rejects him. Yet he sacrifices so much to save them and all this sort of thing. And so one of the great highlights was that we actually get to see a fully realized Krypton. In the original, there's only so much you could do with the effects they had at the time and with the budget and whatnot. So they went with this sort of minimalist approach, which was actually pretty clever and very alien in appearance. Was, you know, this crystalline world and all that sort of stuff. And but really, you would think it would be more of a more exciting looking planet with alien creatures and everything, like something out of Star Wars, and that's what you got. And I really liked that. I think it was high time we get to see that. The music is actually very well done, and is again more of, you know, the John Williams theme cast along Shadow as well. There's a very distinctive sound and theme for Superman. And to try to follow that, boy, it's a tough thing to realize, and yet he certainly did. And it is just sort of up and away, forward and onward type push to it in sound for the theme. So that was successful for it. And so it's actually quite an achievement to pull this off and to bring it together in that manner as it did. And especially with a untried superhero, and it's not something one thinks of as Superman, but it was his first story. All of it is leading up to, oh, there'll be more films after this, and we'll see him grow into Superman. So he's really on his way at the end. He really hasn't become Superman just yet. So there is that. Of course, some of the classic details of Superman are pretty much eliminated. Jimmy Olsen does not show up. We will see him later, sort of. There was a Jenny Olsen, and at the time, they're gender swapping the character. I don't know what that was about out there. Apparently, it was never going to be any connection to Jimmy Olsen, since it was never really established. And then, of course, Perry White was race swapped with Lawrence Fishburne. At the time, I didn't really care about that sort of thing. These days, with the way things are and how it is clearly done for nothing more than tokenism and whatnot, it's strange how that fits, because with the Matt Reeves Batman coming up with so many characters swapped around, it seems to be rather cheap. And maybe that's unfair in some instances, but it does come across that way when so much of it is done just for, you know, the virtue signaling and whatnot. But Fishburne does a good job. He plays the character and his personality pretty much what you would expect, and how this flows through, where it starts out where Lois is sort of finds herself covering a UFO story. And she's supposed to be this serious journalist, but, well, look, she follows this guy into a spaceship, and then he performs surgery on her. So that's all good stuff. And the idea of the ancient spaceship, and that was part of the thing where they had the prequel comic, which reveals he does have a cousin, Kara, but in this version, she's a cousin, but she's an ancient cousin, ancestor to his family. And she crashed on Earth and was the only survivor of that ship. Because if you see the pods, there's one open and there's nothing in it. And that, I guess if they could have gotten the chance to follow through, I thought was going to insinuate that all the superpowered people on Earth are descendants from that woman. Which is a bit odd, but I guess through the filtering of DNA through human DNA means that, like, the Amazons would not be susceptible to kryptonite, and the Atlanteans either, or the Olympians, or what have you, and all that sort of thing. But it's just sort of there. I don't know that you can choose to say that that's the source of the super people on Earth or not, but and of course the idea that Jor-El is basically wearing the Superman tights under his cloak there, which is I always thought was a good idea, is explain why does Superman wear the outfit he wears. Well, that's what Kryptonians wear. That's their fashion sense, and so that all fits in well. To the little floating robots or what have you, I kind of wondered if that was a setup for Eradicator or some sort, because it kind of reminded me of that sort of thing. But anyway, yeah, that was all the good stuff. The performances were pretty spot on for them. The bad was some of the philosophical approaches here. And of course, it fits in with Jonathan Kent's fear of the exposure of Clark to the world, and he felt that he would be rejected and it would cause trouble and whatnot. Plus, he's just scared of the change that's going to come as the knowledge of the existence of Clark. You have to consider that's what he's afraid of as well. But the problem it comes into it, I mean, is that kind of strange thing where he's a bit upset with Clark having saved the kids in the school bus accident. And he says, well, what was I supposed to do? Let him drown? Well, maybe. It's like, no, I don't think so. And I understand his concern and fear, but I just don't think he would say that. And he would say, couldn't you have, I don't know, done it without them seeing you or something, something like that. I don't know. But then finally, the main big flaw that I have, and a lot of people are upset about killing Zod. Again, that goes into freshman superhero. Yeah, the Superman we know from the comic books would have figured out a way to do it, but he doesn't quite have a Phantom Zone projector just yet. He doesn't have a metal protected suit to use kryptonite against him. He doesn't even know what kryptonite is at this point, so it's all very quick, and this is his first major battle, and the guy says, I'm going to barbecue everybody I see, and he reacts. And he regrets it immediately, obviously, and that's the character of the man. But that I don't see as a flaw. I just see it as more of the grounding in reality there. Now, the problem with this is that the death of Jonathan Kent is, to me, the biggest flaw in the film. Because just the way that it had, not that it happened, perhaps they were looking for a different way for him to die instead of like Glenn Ford having a heart attack. But here, where they're saving the people from a tornado, and then Jonathan Kent gets whisked away to Oz. The idea that Clark Kent's just going to stand there. Yeah, it's just not, no. It's just not going to work. It's funny, every time I rewatch the film, I end up feeling like I like it more than I thought I originally did, but that one, I can't justify it. I don't really know how. Is that, well, he's just going to obey Daddy's orders? I don't think so. I think he would have reacted before he even realized what he had just done. And he would have leaped over there in the blink of an eye and saved his father. And in the midst of all that chaos, that's even better than the bus. How much would people really know what they saw and what happened? He probably could get away with it. But to just stand there and cry, I need to think of some other scenario of how Jonathan Kent dies. And I get one of the things is like he looks over at Clark, and Clark is a great distance away. Clark, of course, can see him. He's Superman, but Jonathan Kent just is like, well, he knows what Clark's thinking, and he's waving him down and saying, don't do that. And it's just chalks it up to, well, he obeys his father. Yeah, again, his immediate reaction before he even fully thinks it through. He's already over there grabbing the man and leaping out of the way. And of course, the killing Zod, that's this, it's just stop. And then he kills him. So that's how you explain that. And then here, he just doesn't do it. He doesn't save his father, So that's the biggest. Now, it's one scene. It's a big deal in a lot of ways. But it doesn't destroy the film for me. No, it does not. And I think they made a mistake not pursuing a full-on sequel to this rather than the Batman versus Superman. But it is what it is. And there's been no further Superman projects out of this, and that's a shame, because they did have a fairly good foundation for more films. So now, recently, with some of the tweets from Jay Oliva, he says that the bringing Batman in was always the plan. Now, I don't know. That doesn't quite fit with some of the interviews, the early days of this, that Snyder and even Nolan made. I think when Nolan was talking about it was only going to be a Superman trilogy. He would be the only superhero in the world, that sort of thing. And then at some point they changed that. And then as far as when development on a Batman versus Superman movie, I mean, I guess it could have, as he says, that it was begun while they're wrapping up Man of Steel. So I guess that's what he means. I would think that would be kind of late on that they decided this. The conventional wisdom was that this was done in response that the Man of Steel movie, it was profitable and made money, but it wasn't the big hit they thought it would be. And so they thought, well, bring in Batman and that'll, get more excitement and whatnot. And that was the thinking. But in a way, I suppose both scenarios could be true. But anyway, that's what happens, and that's what will be, of course, the next film in this series of videos I do called Looking Back at Zack. Anyway, Man of Steel, one of the high points, better than Sucker Punch, but yeah, there is a flaw. There is a flaw in it, and I'm not going to lie. As much as I like the film, that is a pretty big flaw in it. And then we have Batman versus Superman, and we'll tackle that one in the next one, which has a lot of flaws, even though I still enjoy the film, the ultimate cut, if you will. Anyway, thank you for watching and listening. Say, why not like and subscribe, and check out that link description below. That'll take you to my mini stores that have plenty of goodies for you, and also a link to that other video platform, BitChute, where my videos are also on display. Yes, because once again, dark clouds are swirling about YouTube, and you just never know. So do check out my channel at BitChute.